Alright everyone, today we are reading Jim Butcher's Full Moon. We are on chapter 22. It's the second book of the Dresden Files. There's a point after which one cannot possibly continue doing complicated things, like thinking and keeping one's eyes open. Blackness ensues, and everything stops until the body, or the mind, is ready to function again. The blackness came for me, and I welcomed it. When I started to wake up, I smelled motor oil. That in itself boded ill. I was seated upright, and an upright metal beam pressed into my back. I felt something constricting my wrists and my ankles. Duct tape. Still, perhaps, there was gold concrete floor beneath me. I was aching everywhere and stiff, but there was something soft over me, a blanket, maybe. I wasn't as cold as I might have been. My first emotion was a vague surprise that I was still alive. The second was a cold, nasty little shiver. I was a prisoner, and as long as I was, survival was by no means certain. First things first then, make it certain. Find out where I was, devise a plan, and get my skinny wizard ass out of there. After all, it would be a real pity to die when I'd finally put tabs on who had gotten me into this mess, as well as who was responsible for the recent killings that couldn't be attributed to McFinn, and probably who had set him up as well. To that end, I opened my eyes and tried to get a look at my surroundings. I was in the enemy's stronghold, the Full Moon Garage. It was dim inside, and from what I could hear, it was still raining without. There was a dirty but warm blanket over me, which came as something of a surprise. There was also a little stand with a mostly empty plastic bag, of which I took to be blood, dripping down a plastic tube that vanished behind me, out of sight, and presumably ended at my arm. I wiggled my feet out from beneath the blanket. My legs had been duct taped together above and below the knee, and at the ankle. My bitten foot had been wrapped in clean bandages, then covered in my bloody sock. In fact, I found a number of clean bandages on various cuts and scrapes, and I could smell faintly, as though my nose had been given a while to get used to it, the sharp medicine smell of disinfectant. I couldn't feel Murphy's sawed-through handcuffs on my wrists, and found myself vaguely missing them. At least they'd been familiar, if not comfortable. So not only was I alive, but I was in considerably better shape after presumably several hours of sleep and medical attention. But that didn't explain who had done this to me, or why. I looked around the dimness of the garage. My eyes were now adjusted to it, but even so, there were pockets of shadows too deep to see into. An L-shaped ribbon of yellow light showed beneath the door to the manager's office, and the sound of rain on the corrugated roof was a low, soothing roar. I closed my eyes, trying to orient myself, to determine what time it was from the feel of the air and the sound of the rain. Late afternoon? Early evening? I couldn't tell for sure. I coughed and found my throat dry, but functional. My hands were bound, and I didn't have any way of making a circle. Without a circle, I couldn't use any delicate magic to free myself. All I had access to was the kaboom sort of power, which, while great against nasty Lugaroo and other monsters, isn't much good at getting rid of several layers of duct tape resting within half an inch of my own tender skin. Magic was out. Did I ever tell you about my dad? He was a magician, not a wizard, mind you, but a magician, the kind you see at old-fashioned magic shows. He had a black top hat, a white rabbit, a basket of swords, and everything. He used to travel around the country, performing for the kids and the old folks, barely making enough to scrape by. After Mom died during childbirth, Dad had the job of raising me all by himself, and I guess he did the best he could. He meant well. I was real young when he died. I refused to believe Zagoroth's insinuations until I had looked into them further, of a brain aneurysm. But I learned a thing or three about what he did before then. He'd named me after 3 magicians, after all. The first of which was Houdini himself. And one of Houdini's first rules was that the means to escape was always within your grasp. Positive attitude, and the fact that a human being can escape from just about everything, given enough time. The only question was, how much time did I have left? The duct tape was strong, and it was fastened tightly. But it was also cheap, easy to transport, and simple to apply. Even though it was wound around me in multiple layers, it wasn't the best thing for holding people. Or else the cops would use duct tape and not handcuffs and manacles. It could be beaten, so I started looking for ways to beat it. A little writhing showed me that my hands weren't fastened as tightly as they could have been. I could feel a sharp pain in my forearm and guessed that was from the IV. They had to loosen the tape on my arms to get the needle into my forearm. I wiggled my shoulders, which set the wounded one aching fiercely. The tape put pressure on my wrists and tore the hair from my arms with an audible ripping sound, and I clenched my teeth over this particular torment. It hurt, and it took me the best part of 10 minutes, but I got my wrists and hands free. I ditched the IV needle while I was at it, imagining some deadly fluid flowing down the tube into my veins. Then I flexed my arms repeatedly and got them free. My fingers were numb, stiff, not really responding, but I started fumbling at the tape on my legs as best I could, trying to get tears started so I could just flex my legs and get the whole thing to go at once. It took more effort than I thought it would, but I finally flexed my legs, thankful that the jumpsuit kept me from losing stripes of hair from my thighs and calves, if not from my ankles. My legs were much stronger than my arms, so snapping the layers of duct tape on them was a lot simpler and quicker. Just not simple or quick enough. Before I'd gotten out of the last loop of duct tape, there was a click-clack, and the office door swung open, accompanied by a murmur of low voices and a tinny din of old-time rock and roll music. I panicked. I couldn't run. My ankles were still bound. By the time I got free and struggled to my feet, they'd be on me. So I did the next best thing. I whipped the blanket up and over me, snaked my hands back behind the pole, grabbing up the IV needle as I went and concealing it in my hand, and bent my head far forward as though I was still asleep. I still don't get why I can't just put a bullet in him and dump him, said a harsh voice with no nasal tone at all. Flat nose. Stupid, Parker growled, his voice like sandpaper. 1, we don't do it without having the others here to see, and 2, we don't do it until Marcone's had a chance to see him. Marcone, Flatnose said with a sneer in his voice. What do you want with him? Good question, I thought. I kept my head down, my body relaxed, and tried to think sleepy thoughts. Marcone was coming here? Who cares, Parker answered. I made sure he'd live through the day. Either way, I wanted him here tonight. No skin off my teeth. Flatnose grunted. Chicago sees a lot of mobsters. Marcone's just one more. But one phone call from him, and this wizard character gets a reprieve. Who is this guy, huh? The freaking governor? Always thinking with your balls, Parker said, his voice calm. Marcone isn't just a mobster. Running Chicago is just his sideline, see? He's got business all over the country, and he owns people from here to the governor's mansion to Washington and back, and he's got more money than God. He can set us up, take us out, have the police on our ass any time he wants. You don't screw with someone like that lightly. There was a pause, and then Flatnose said, maybe. Or maybe Lana's right. Maybe you're getting soft. Marcone isn't one of us. He doesn't give us orders. The Parker I knew 10 years ago wouldn't have thought twice of telling Marcone to fuck off. Parker's voice became resigned. Don't do this, man. You're never good enough, even when we were young. The Parker you knew 10 years ago would have gotten all of us killed by now. I've kept you in cash, in dope, woman, whatever you wanted. So settle down. I don't buy it, Flatnose said back. I think Lon is right, and I say we off this skinny son of a bitch right now. I felt myself tense and prepared to make a run for it, hopeless or not. I'd rather get killed trying to get away than trying to pretend I was asleep. "Back down," Parker said. And then there was a scuffling noise of boots on old concrete. I heard a couple of grunts and an abrupt yelp, and smelled sour sweat and stale beer as Flatnose was forced to his knees less than a foot away. He kept making small noises of pain, thick with tension, as though Parker were holding him in some sort of lock. I forced myself to relax, not to just stagger up and start running, but I felt a bead of sweat trickle down my face. Parker snarled over Flatnose's whimpers. "I told you, you were never good enough. Challenge me again, in public or alone, it doesn't matter, and I will rip your heart out." The way he spoke the threat was eerie, not with the hissing, villainous emphasis one would expect, but in a calm, measured, almost bored tone, as though he were mentioning switching out a carburetor or changing a light bulb. There was a rippling sort of sound, and Flatnose let out a howl of pain that dissolved into a string of dog-like whimpers. I heard Parker's boots move a few steps away. "Now get up," he said. "Call Toolies and get the others back here before the moon rises. We'll have blood tonight, and if Marcone isn't polite enough, we'll have a lot more." I heard Flatnose make his way to his feet and shuffle off in a slow and haphazard fashion. He vanished into the office and closed the door behind him. I waited for a few moments, hoping that Parker would wander off, and I could make my escape. But he didn't. Damn it! I was running out of time. If I waited until the rest of the lycanthropes returned to the garage, I'd never be able to get away. The numbers would be stacked too high. If I was going to make a break for it, logically, the time was now. Of course, I was still bound. By the time I got my legs free, Parker would be on me, and I'd just listened to him disable a man twice his size, and threaten to rip his heart out. He'd meant it, too. I could tell. When I had looked inside of him, I had seen a dark and angry place. The source of all that power and force of will. He could tear me to pieces with his bare hands, literally, and what was worse, he would. I had to have a head start if I was going to run. I could make him mad, maybe, antagonize him into going to get a baseball bat, or another roll of duct tape for my mouth. Then I could run, make a clean getaway. The one problem with that plan was that he might just rip my heart out on the spot, but nothing ventured, nothing gained. I didn't have time to be picky, so I lifted up my head enough to squint at him in the semi-darkness and said, "You certainly have a way with people. You must have read a book or something." My voice startled him, and he spun with the reflexes of a nervous cat. He stared at me for a long minute before starting to relax. "So, you're alive. It's just as well, I suppose. Mostly, I was just tired. Thanks for the sack time." He showed me his teeth. "No problem. Checkout is in a couple of hours." That scared me enough to make a rational man pee, but I only shrugged. "No problem. Good thing your people can't hit. They might have made me uncomfortable." Parker laughed a rough laugh. "You got balls, kid, I'll give you that. At least, until Lana gets her teeth into them later." This wasn't going at all well. I had to find some way to piss him off, not make him laugh. "How's the knee?" Parker narrowed his eyes. "A lot better. It didn't quite heal up before sunrise, but I figure it'll only take an hour or so after the moon comes up." "I should have aimed higher," I said. Parker's jaw clenched down a little. "Too late now, kid. Game over. Enjoy it while you can. I hear your people are getting a little sick of you. Do you think Lana will be the one to tear your balls off when they put you down?" His boot came out of nowhere and hit me in the side of the head. It threw me hard to my right, and if I hadn't clenched my arms at the last minute, it would have thrown me to the floor and revealed my lack of bonds. "You just don't know when to keep quiet, do you, wizard? What have I got to lose?" I shot back at him. "I mean, hell, It isn't as though all of the people that looked up to me have turned against me, right? It isn't as though I'm getting too old to manage Shut up, Parker snarled, his eyes taking on an eerie greenish cast in the darkness. A trick of the light, and he kicked me again. This time in the stomach. My breath went out in a whoosh, and I fought to continue speaking. Waking up stiffer every morning, eating less, maybe not as strong as you used to be, right? Not as fast. Got to beat up on old dogs like Flatnose there, because you try one of the younger ones, they'll take you down. The plan was working beautifully. Now all I needed was for him to stalk out of the room, to calm down, or to fetch an instrument of mayhem, or some more duct tape, anything. Instead, Parker just spun on his heel, picked up a tire iron, and turned back to me, lifting it high. Fuck Marcone, he snarled, and fuck you, wizard. His muscles bunched beneath his old t-shirt as he raised the iron above his head. His eyes gleamed with the same sort of animalistic fury I had beheld in the other lycanthropes the night before. His mouth was stretched in a feral grin, and I could see the cords in his neck standing out as he wound up to give me the death blow. I hate it when a plan falls apart. I clenched my teeth and kicked my legs. The duct tape around my ankles gave way, but it was too late to do me any good. I didn't have time to get my weight beneath me, to run, but I made the gesture in any case. Just one of those things you do when you're about to die, I guess. Mr. Hendricks, came a very hard, very calm voice. If Mr. Parker does not put down the tire iron in the next second or two, please shoot him dead. Yes, sir, Mr. Marcone, Hendricks's rumbling basso answered. I looked over to my right to see Gentleman Johnny Marcone standing at the door in a gray Italian business suit. Hendricks stood in front of him and a bit to one side, in a much cheaper suit, holding a pump-action shotgun with a short barrel, its stock worked into a pistol grip in his meaty paws. The gaping black mouth of the barrel was leveled at Parker's head. Parker's face snapped around to focus on Marcone at the same time mine did. Parker's jaw clenched and his eyes narrowed to furious slits. His weight shifted from one foot to the other, as though he were preparing to throw the tire iron. That's a 12-gauge riot gun, Mr. Parker, Marcone said. I'm fully aware of your rather special endurance at this time of the month. Mr. Hendricks's weapon is loaded with solid slug ammunition, and after several rounds have torn literal pounds of flesh from your body and ruptured the majority of your internal organs, I am reasonably certain that even you would perish. Marcone smiled very politely, while Hendricks clicked the safety off of the weapon and settled his feet as though he expected firing the gun to knock him down. Please, Marcone said, put down the tire iron. Parker glanced back at me, and I could see the beast raging in his eyes, wanting to howl out and bathe in blood. It terrified me, made me go cold. Right through my gut and down through my loins. There was more fury and rage there than any of the other members of the street wolves had demonstrated. Their own berserk losses of control had looked like a child's tantrum next to what I saw in Parker's eyes. But he controlled it. He lowered his arm slowly and took 2 steps back from me. And I felt my breath whisper out in a sigh of relief. I wasn't dead. Yet. My kick hadn't quite dragged the blanket off of me, and I was still settled with my back against a steel post. They didn't know that I was loose underneath the rough wool. It wasn't much of an advantage, but it was all I had. I needed to find a way to use it, and fast. My people are coming, Parker growled. If you try any more of that heavy-handed shit, I'll have you torn apart. They are coming, Marcone said placidly, but they are not yet here. Their motorcycles have all suffered flat tires, quite mysteriously. We have time to do business. Wait a second. I started in chapter 22, didn't I, Lindsay?
I'll hit square real quick. Mean claws.
No, hit the square.
Okay. Look at the camera.